Hi, I'm Heidi Rader, Professor of Extension with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I'm here today with Sam Knapp at Offbeet Farm near Fairbanks, Alaska. Sam, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with a winter CSA here in Fairbanks, Alaska?
I kind of fell into doing winter farming or farming storage crops specifically when I was starting a first farm. Years ago, back in Michigan, I didn't really have time to run a traditional summer farm, going to summer farmers markets, and it just made more sense to grow winter crops. And my wife and I moved to Fairbanks, and it worked so well in Michigan that I decided to give it a try here, and the community has responded very positively.
Great.
Yeah.
So what are you growing here?
Oh, we grow all sorts of crops that you can keep for storage. Carrots is a big one for us, cabbages, rutabagas, beets, turnips, even winter squash.
So you went to school for a variety of things, chemistry, physics. You could do anything, it sounds like, with your background, engineering and whatnot. And yet you're here growing root crops in Fairbanks. Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy of why you do that?
Yeah, when I caught the farming bug in my 20s, I felt very idealistic about making a difference for the environment, growing food for your local community, and I still think those things are important, but the reason that I continue to farm is that I enjoy the work. There's a lot of troubleshooting that needs to happen. I need to wear very many different hats, but at the end of the day, I just like what I do.
Yeah, you've written a book, Beyond the Root Cellar, and in the book you talk a lot about your research process. I found it really interesting how you look at the literature and then keep really detailed records and sort of ground truth a lot of the research that's done at universities and whatnot with economics and practicality. Can you tell us a little bit more about your research process?
Yeah, when you find advice, for example, in like university extension pieces, just on the nature of who those are for, sometimes there's sources cited, sometimes not, and you see the same advice kind of like propagated throughout many different extension pieces, and it is very interesting to find where did that advice come from and what circumstances are omitted in this advice. Sometimes there ends up being kind of this funny game of telephone where the original research that spawned this advice wasn't actually talking about this specific circumstance, or the results weren't as clear cut as the extension publications lead you to believe. It's fun to kind of sleuth that stuff out. And
I completely agree with you. It's a really interesting take on that, but I think that definitely happens.
Yeah.
And in the effort to simplify and give clear advice to a garden situation, and a lot of times you have research that is maybe geared towards a commercial situation, and there's a lot less research done on a smaller scale too. I think that's part of the missing piece, so that's really cool. All right, well, can you show us around your farm?
Sure, yeah.
All right. So you're using organic methods here predominantly?
Yeah, I stick to, I'm not certified organic, but I do follow the rules whenever possible. Yeah.
And you leave the residue in the field, the crop residue. Looks like you're cover cropping. What other methods do you use for soil fertility?
We do add compost whenever we can get it. We try to leave as much plant material in the field as possible. And then we're using organic certified fertilizers, grouping in with other farms who, we ship them up in large quantities to reduce the shipping costs.
Nice.
Yeah, I think from when we cleared the field 5 years ago, some of the worst areas of the field had organic matter percentages around 2 or 3, and we've bumped up to 7 or 8% in those areas.
So you cleared this whole field?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I never want to do it again.
Yeah, that's a big cost and time
Yeah.
sink for farming in Alaska in a lot of places.
Yeah, definitely. It certainly makes me respect all the fields that I see around town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so most of your crops are direct seeded into the field, maybe with the exception of the winter squash and...
Yeah, winter squash, cabbages, kohlrabi, kale we transplant. We probably don't have more than 50 trays going at a time though, so most of what we do is direct seeded.
Do you have a greenhouse where you start your plants, or are you starting somewhere in your
We
storage?
will start in the storage building early in the spring, and then when it's warm enough outside, we just have hoops similar to what home gardeners use, just PVC hoops with covered in row cover. Yeah.
And you talked about using a Jang seeder.
Yeah. I think the Jang seeder is probably one of our most efficient tools. Sufficient for time, but I think if somebody is thinking about farming or gardening at a larger scale, taking the time and money to invest in something like a Jang seeder is 100% worth it. A bed of carrots like this that is 100 feet long and has 4 rows in it would have taken me 8 hours to seed by hand, and with a Jang I can do it in less than 10 minutes. Yeah.
And what is your bed setup? Are most of your beds 100 feet long, or how wide?
Yeah, so we try to keep beds standardized to 100 feet, and that lets us use drip tape and row cover and things like that interchangeably around the farm. We use like the typical market gardener spacings with 30-inch bed tops and beds 4 feet on center.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you till with in the spring?
In the spring, we have a BCS walk-behind tractor, and I till with their precision depth roller, which allows me to set the tilling depth really precisely. I try not to go more than 3 or 4 inches. So we're only really tilling that top part of the soil to give us a good seeding surface.
Nice.
Yeah.
And are you growing your winter squash in any kind of plastic mulch, or?
Yeah, we use, I don't have a good name for it. It's not, some people call it Typar, but it's the woven black plastic that's used as road underlayment.
Okay.
And the plastic that we're using right now, we've been using for 5 seasons, and there's no sign of it deteriorating yet, so we'll see how long we get from it.
Great.
Yeah.
When do you start planting in the field?
Usually the first thing or 2 that go in, parsnips and onions are usually the first 2 in. And those, for the past couple of years, it's been consistently around the 20th of May.
Okay.
I try to grow organic varieties, and the organic certification rules say that you can grow conventional seed if you can't find an alternative variety for that, or an organic alternative for the variety that you want to grow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you, how are you growing the onions? Are you purchasing live plants or growing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have done both, but I find that because I have to start onions in early March if I'm going to grow them from seed, that by the time I count in both my time and the electricity and heating costs to starting them early, that it's really not much different than just buying the plants, and so I'll just buy the plants. Yeah.
Great. What about garlic seed? Do you save your own?
I do, yeah. We've been propagating out the same line of Chesnick Red that came from Maggie Hallam, who grew it out from, for, 5 to 10 years before us.
Okay.
And we have really good survival with it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your favorite varieties of different crops?
Oh, yeah. For carrots, I think it's not a particularly long storage carrot. We usually keep this one through the end of February without problem, which is long enough for most people, but it's a white carrot called White Satin, and it is the highest yielding carrot I've ever grown consistently through the years. And it's really delicious. Like CSA customers rave about its flavor. Cabbages, I was very impressed this year with a long green storage variety called Passat. and that was from high mowing. It just had really consistent and vigorous growth. We've been growing Subito as our main storage beet for a while, but I've been trying other varieties, like Rhonda is one that we tried this year with pretty good results. Helenor for rutabagas is a really consistently growing hybrid. And garlic, I'm trying to think, Chesnick Red is the one that we've been growing for years and get really, really good winter survival.
And you have to choose variety based in large part on their storage ability.
Yeah, I will sometimes choose varieties that aren't the best storage varieties because they offer some other interesting trait like color or shape. But I know that I need to sell those first. I always have a stock of like the best storage varieties in order to kind of like bring my sales all the way through the end of the spring. Yeah.
And then
So it's mid-September. It looks like you've started harvesting cabbage here, and you leave a lot of the leaves here behind. When does your harvest start, and how long does your harvest typically take?
Oh, yeah. Our main harvest is mainly the month of September, and I usually start Labor Day or the day after Labor Day and try to finish, not always, but try to finish before the end of September, when freezing weather and snow is more and more likely. We do harvest a few crops before that time. So in August, early August, the garlic comes out, and early to mid-August, just kind of depending on the weather for that summer, the onions will come out. But then after that, it's in September. We kind of just go based upon what's ready and what needs to get out of the field based on weather and temperatures.
Yeah, and I've read in your book in presentations that you really try to harvest at the ideal maturity, not too mature, but mature enough for ideal storage is really important.
Yeah, kind of getting that right can be difficult at times. Depending on the weather for the summer, some crops may be ahead of where they should be, and some crops may be behind where they should be. And so deciding what needs to come out when is often a game of just observing what's going on in the field and triaging the things that need to come out and letting some other things wait as long as possible so they can mature.
Yeah. And you really like the cooler temperatures too for cooling down all of your crops.
Yeah, the cooler it is outside, the less pressure it puts on the cooling system that we have.
Great. Is cabbage the crop you start with usually or for harvest?
It depends. This year we started with beets because they were really antsy to get out of the field. They had sized up early. It was a really warm summer. And so we decided those were the most ready. They need to get out. Cabbages, because we grew so much cabbage this year and we had another field of cabbage in town, needed to get out just in order to have the cooler. Packing the cooler is like one thing I'm thinking about while deciding what to harvest.
What tools do you use for harvesting?
Our harvest is very low tech. Most things we harvest by hand, just pulling them out of the field and cutting them with a simple, we really like Victorinox fishing knives. Work really, really well for harvesting. We do have a root harvesting broad fork, which we use sometimes for like deep-rooted crops like carrots and parsnips, or just smaller digging forks, and then a garden cart to move these things around. In the past, we've harvested into 5-gallon buckets, and this year we're using the crates that you might see on a peony farm. They're easier and more efficient to soak before washing the crops.
And you soak all your crops before washing them?
Yeah, it just makes the washing process faster. Yeah, and helps us collect some of the soil that leaves the field on the crops. In our soak tank, every 2-3 days, I'll empty it and take that sediment and put it into our compost pile.
So most of your harvest is happening in September. Does your summer, it's just less busy than most farmers, would you say?
I think so. because
You're not going to farmers markets.
Yeah.
You're not doing any of the selling in the summer, at least.
Exactly. It's selling, going to markets, packaging veggies for wholesale, all of that takes time. And none of that for us is happening in the summertime. So I think, especially as a small business owner and running a relatively small farm, all the work of packaging and selling that I would have to pay somebody to do, I end up being able to do that myself in the wintertime.
And you do that primarily through a winter CSA?
Yeah, that's most of our business. It's about 75% of our sales go through that CSA, but we also do some local wholesale and some local winter markets.
And how long do your veggies keep for?
Oh, it depends on the veggie, but we can reliably keep kind of a core of really long storage crops like carrots and cabbages and rutabagas, turnips, things like that. We can keep them through the end of April easily.
When does your CSA start in the fall?
Usually around the end of October. This year it's coming a little earlier, but yeah, end of October, beginning of November is usually when we start.
Basically when the farmers markets close.
Yeah, it's when the farmers markets close and the other farms in town run out of whatever stock they have after those last markets, which usually is before Halloween.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many people do you have helping in the harvest season?
Well, it's difficult to find people who are able to work full-time for such a short period, but as far as full-time equivalents, it's around two to 2.5, depending on the year.
Okay. So I noticed you've got a nice moose fence here. Is that one of you, like, what are some of your big pest challenges?
Yeah, well, moose, obviously, for anybody who grows in Alaska, we have to deal with moose. Meadow voles are a big pest for us, although the populations have really dropped since that 2022 or 2023 ice storm. They haven't been that much of an issue for us. And then, of course, cabbage root maggots are a huge problem for anybody growing brassicas in the interior of Alaska. We mitigate that by covering any root brassica, so like turnips and radishes and rutabagas, things like that. You have to cover them with row cover from early June when they're planted all the way through mid-August or so, when the damage from any subsequent generations isn't going to damage them too much.
So this is your storage facility. Important part of having a winter CSA is this building right here. Can you tell us a little bit about the building? And
Yeah. So I built this in 2021, and I think that, well, somebody who wants to do wintertime storage, you need some place to keep your vegetables, and you don't necessarily need a building like this, but it's really convenient for running my business because it puts the place where I store the vegetables and where I get them ready for sale in the same location. So I don't need to like drag veggies outside or up from a basement or anything like that. I can just wheel them from one room to the next. So the building, it's built like a garage. There is another garage door framed in there in case we ever sold the property, then somebody didn't want to have a vegetable farm. But it's basically divided in half, so that one half is warm storage and a warm space for me to prep vegetables, and the other half is cold, wet storage, where we can keep most of our crops just out in the open in large storage bins. The cold side, we do cool mechanically in the fall during harvest time so that the crops can be cold enough, and that will help extend their storage life. As the winter progresses, we'll eventually start pulling in cold air from outside to cool that room and hold it at 32 degrees. We have to do very little heating through the year. If it's 15 below for more than a day or so here, which being above the inversion doesn't happen that often, I'll have to heat with a a small 1500 watt space heater on the cold side. But other than that, the veggies themselves are creating enough heat that I don't have to cool, or I don't have to heat much, and actually spend most of my time cooling.
Nice.
Yeah.
And your book called Beyond the Root Cellar is basically about this type of storage.
Yeah.
And you monitor the temperature and humidity pretty closely, and you've also researched that aspect of things pretty closely.
Yeah. Most long-term storage crops want to be kept at 32 degrees and humidity that's about as high as you can get it. And so you use thermostats, or I use thermostats and humidistats to hold the room temperature and humidity where I want it. Yeah.
Nice. Because it's pretty costly for you to, if you have veggies that rot, to go through and
Yeah.
lose those and sort them out and things.
Yeah, I mean, anytime vegetables rot in storage, it's lost income. That said, we do expect, or I plan to lose a certain percentage of everything every season. But so long as I plan for it, it's not a problem for the business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's take a look inside.
Let's do it.
So this is the warm part of your
Yeah.
storage area. It's about 80 degrees in here, and you're curing the squash.
Yeah. So I think with most Alaskan growers, it's really difficult to fully mature winter squash in the time that we have. And so when we bring them into storage, it's really important that we pull moisture out of these stems that are left on there, and also kind of dry out the rest of the skins and any moisture that's on the outside of the squash. So we hold this room close to 80 degrees for 10 days to 2 weeks, and also we're dehumidifying this space as well, down to about 50% relative humidity, just to get all that moisture out of the squash.
And the squash is in here for that long?
It is, yeah. It will stay here. We bring it
Okay.
straight in here to cure, and
Yeah.
then after 2 weeks or so, we'll lower the temperature down to 55
Okay.
for the rest of the winter.
And you've got, 10 varieties in here or so? Or?
Probably, yeah. We've been trialing out some new varieties, but we kind of have our staples, like Sweet Mama is a Maxima type squash that almost always does well. This spaghetti squash, oh my gosh, this is a monster.
Look at that.
This spaghetti squash is a variety called Pinnacle, and it consistently yields just humongous yields from this thing.
Wow.
This is a variety called Gold Nugget, another Maxima squash that stores really, really well and has really good flavor. Just trying to make sure everything you need early in the season is accessible, and kind of putting the successive layers behind that. So when you've used one thing, the next thing is exposed.
Yeah, you don't want to have to get to that bin down there and move all of these.
No. So yeah, I've intentionally put what I think I'm going to be using last down in the bottom. And then these racks behind us, these are nice because you can kind of get at everything at once.
Right.
Yeah.
That's nice. And you can only do those on the sides of this room because you want to be able to move things and pack more in.
Yeah,
together.
and I think any farmer or homeowner will will find that a space that they've set up is always not big enough.
Right.
You're always looking for more space. Yeah.
Yeah, and you want to be able to move the orientation too.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
So what type of bins are these, and how much do those hold?
So I have kind of two iterations of these. One came from a farm in Delta, and these are the same bins that Spinach Creek Farm uses for their carrots. Each one of these will hold 80 pounds. I've seen, depending on the variety, up to 100 pounds.
Okay. Well, let's go check out the cold storage
Yeah.
room. So we're here in the cold room, and it's 32 degrees-ish?
It's 35 right
Okay.
now. These coolers can't actually get down to 32. They would ice up. Their fins would get covered in a block of ice if we tried to get down to 32.
Okay.
And that's because they defrost using air in this room. But later on in the winter, once it's cold outside, we'll start pulling in air, and it will be 32 in here. For now, though, 34, 35 is good enough for about a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you've got carrots, beets, cabbage, in varying sizes of crates.
Yeah, exactly. These large storage containers, they're new for us this year. They hold, like, this bin behind you is probably about 550 pounds of carrots. It's probably 300 or 400 pounds of cabbages. Kind of just depends what you're putting in there. But we're able to use our space much more efficiently than we used to by stacking them nearly to the ceiling. Yeah, it's a nice change.
And you've got this new forklift.
Yeah,
to do that with.
exactly. It's much better on my back throughout harvest season.
And so on all the walls, you've got some waterproof metal, it looks like.
Yeah, metal would be ideal, although we had to use, these are polycarbonate panels, because we built the building during COVID and had to find ways to cut costs to get, build the building with the loan funds that we had available.
Okay.
But metal would be ideal. Yeah.
And that's just to protect the insulation from all the moisture that
Yeah.
you've got in the room.
In theory, we could spray the walls down if we wanted to, although it's not something that I regularly do. I have, actually last season I did wash the walls with bleach before we started the storage season, so it gives us the option to do things like that.
So will this room fill up completely by the end of harvest season?
Yeah, the plan is to have bins stacked 3 high, pretty much all the way to the edge.
And again, it's going to be first in, last out.
One nice thing is that the bin on the bottom of every stack has wheels, and so I can move them around a little bit. There's enough
great.
space for me to slide bins out into this aisle and push them to the side slightly to get at the second row if I need to, but I try not to.
Yeah, that seems like a heavy
Yeah.
move.
They also have, all these bins have like a drop down side, and so I can get at them even if they're in the middle of a stack. And access the contents inside. So there's a lot of options. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when your CSA starts, what's your process of grabbing what you need for that CSA?
I typically, instead of rolling a large bin into the warm room to pack out of, I'll usually bring things into smaller containers. So I'll use a rolling cart and maybe like a large tote bin and just kind of grab veggies into that tote and then wheel them into the warmer room to pack them. And this year we're switching to more of like corrugated plastic, almost like mail totes, and we'll pack veggies loose into those and deliver a CSA member a whole box of loose veggies that they can then take home in their own containers.
And how many members do you have in your CSA?
This year, it will probably be around 150 families when things are all said and done.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And is it all one size CSA, or do you offer
I wish.
variations?
We offer 4 sizes right now. And I think of one of them as like the standard size, and that's kind of what I do all my planning off of. And the other sizes are some multiple of those, like 2 times or 1.5 times. I think our standard size is still the most popular, with our small size being really popular as well. But there are some large families who want large amounts of veggies, and so we have those larger sizes to accommodate them as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And you do the pickup in town or at the farm?
We've got a bunch of options for people this year. They can pick up in town. They can pick up at a winter farmers market that we attend. They can pick up at the farm, and this year, for the first time, I'm offering home delivery for a fee for people who can't make any of those other options or just want the convenience of it. But I have intentionally made it a little bit expensive so that I don't have to be driving so much. But if people want it, it's there.
Winter's Farmers Market. I guess I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, it's in the Gold Stream. It's new this year, and I hope to see more winter market options. Tanana Valley Farmers Market has talked about doing some kind of winter venue, and whether or not that happens, we'll see.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this room?
Yeah,
what you're
well,
doing here?
I guess right now we're just cooling it, but later on in the winter we'll also be adding humidity to the room. Some veggies we'll leave out in the open, like cabbages or something that they're easy to process even if they've dried out a little bit. You can always peel off the outer layers. But things like carrots are really sensitive to drying out, and so we have kind of large liner bags that will cover the outside of the bin with to just loosely to help hold in some moisture around those carrots.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you wash all your veggies before they come in here.
Yeah, and that's really a logistical thing. We could wash them after storage. We just don't have the infrastructure to do it efficiently, so we wash everything in the fall when we can do it outside.
Yeah, you'd pretty much need an indoor washroom for that.
Yeah, yep. I think we'd need another room of this size or larger to accommodate something like that.
And before you had these bins, you were using grain bags and different things for storage?
Yeah, we were using like 27-gallon totes for more specialty stuff, and then large super sacks or sling bags, or whatever you want to call them, just as a really inexpensive alternative. The downside with those is that you can't stack them. And so we had kind of home-built pallet racking, but we were still not using the space very efficiently. Okay. This year we're probably going to have 7,000 or 8,000 more pounds than we've ever had in this room before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right, so can you tell us about your heating and cooling system?
Yeah, so these are new to the farm this year. These are heat pumps, and so they can either heat or cool. We're using 2 of them for the cold room in cooling mode, and those are what are controlled by the cool bots. So these would usually be used in a residential situation to cool, or to be an air conditioner down to about 62 degrees, I think is their lowest setting, but the cool bot tricks them into thinking the room is much warmer than it actually is. And so it cycles them through cooling cycles while also watching the fins and making sure that they're not getting covered in ice. The heating one is keeping our warm room warm and helping us cure the squash right now. And we'll see for this winter what the energy usage is like, but they're supposed to be 2 to 2.5 times more efficient than just regular electric resistance heat. So we're hoping to really reduce our energy usage this year. And also behind these, you can see that we're siding the building a little bit. And we were able to use spruce that we dropped while clearing this field and milled here on site. So eventually the whole building will be covered in this lovely spruce, but needed to get this section done before we put the heat pumps up. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say is one of your biggest challenges?
I think irrigation is a challenge. We use drip irrigation because uncertainties about our well system, if it has enough capacity to deliver an overhead system. So drip irrigation takes up so much of my time early in the season. I think that getting any kind of equipment and like materials here, dealing with the shipping costs for getting them here is it's a burden. There are certain things that we can't grow, and there's varying amounts of information out there on that. Sometimes you just have to learn the hard way that there are onions, or finding that like one variety of onion that really works well in Fairbanks has taken a few years to get that down. That variety is Alyssa Craig, by the way.
Okay. And this is your primary occupation?
Yeah, so the farm for me is my primary income. I am a writer, so I get a small amount of income from writing, but as any other writer knows, it's not much. So this is mainly what I make money from.
And in terms of food security, how important do you think it is for farms like you to fill in that winter season?
Given the demand that I have and the excitement that my customers have about us being here, I think it's really important. think we're the only like diversified veggie farm in town or in the area that has crops consistently like late into winter. I definitely think we could have more.
More farmers.
Yeah.
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 Nice. Do you have any advice for another farmer that may want to start a winter CSA and focus on that?
Yeah. I think that you should start small, or at least start experimenting with storing crops at a smaller scale for at least a year or two before you take it commercial. Just there's so much to learn and so much potential for loss in storage. But that said, I think cabbage is a really good crop to start with because you don't need a washing setup. And if things go wrong, you can always peel away the damage.
Awesome.